Hello, this video is on the nervous system, and particularly this video is on the structure of the nervous system. This is Dave, and I'm going to take you through this video. There will be videos to follow on action potentials, synapses, and sensitivity of flowering plants. But first of all, structure of the nervous system. Before we actually look at the physical structure of the nervous system, let's just consider what it does. It consists of sensory organs which receive information from either inside the body or from outside of the body via sense organs. These might be eyes, might be sense organs in the skin, the ears, tongue, nose, etc. This information is transferred along nerves of the nervous system to the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, and the brain and the spinal cord determine a response, and the response will be made by either a muscle or a gland, which we call effectors, and the information is sent to the muscle or the gland. In order to carry out the response, it's sent along neurons called motor neurons to facilitate that response. So it's basically what the nervous system is about, and let's look at its structure. There are three main types of nerve cells: sensory, relay, and motor nerve cells. You can see on these diagrams. They differ slightly in their appearance. The sensory nerve cell, or sensory neuron, is there to carry information from the receptors, sense organs, such as the nose, to the central nervous system. This can be directly to the brain, or it can be to the spinal cord, and then information is passed up the spinal cord to the brain often. The relay neurons, these are the most common neurons found in the nervous system. Many millions of them in the brain. These carry information from one nerve cell, one neuron, to another, but also can connect sensory neurons to motor neurons. Very simple nerve pathway would be from a sensory neuron through a relay neuron straight to a motor neuron, but most pathways involve many more relay neurons than this. And motor neurons, which carry information from the central nervous system, from the brain and spinal cord, carry impulses from these parts of the body to effectors, which are either muscles or glands, such as tear glands, for example. The direction of the impulse is determined by what type of neuron we're looking at. Look at the structure of an individual neuron. The type of neuron that we require to know in detail for this course is a motor neuron. And here's a picture of a motor neuron in front of you. It has a cell body, so a larger area at one end of the cell, and this is where the nucleus is, and also visible under a good microscope are groupings of ribosomes, which are called Nissl granules. And these are responsible for manufacturing the chemicals called neurotransmitter substances, which carry the impulse from one nerve cell to another. And we'll look at these later when we look at synapses. The cell body has leading into it many dendrites, so these are short projections of the cytoplasm, and these carry nerve impulses from other cells into the cell body. Also, leading from the cell body is a much longer cytoplasmic extension called an axon, and this carries a nerve impulse away from the cell body, and at the other end of the axon will be an effector, a muscle or a nerve. In vertebrates, axons are very often surrounded by cells called Schwann cells, which wrap themselves around the axon, and these are very rich in lipid, so they act as an electrical insulator, and these help speed up the nerve transmission. Along the length of the Schwann cells there are short thinning of the Schwann cells, or gaps between the Schwann cells, which are called nodes of Ranvier. And conduction of an impulse can jump from one node of Ranvier to the next, and this creates a much more rapid form of transmission called saltatory transmission of nerve impulses. Okay, so you need to know the structure of a nerve cell. You need to be able to draw a motor neuron and label it, and you need to know the roles of each of the structures mentioned and on the slide there. Okay, if we move along, we're now looking at one of the simplest response that we can get to a stimulus found in the body. It's called a spinal reflex. Basically, a message comes from a sensory receptor, passes into the spine along a sensory neuron, then goes to a relay neuron, or an interneuron, it's also called. The signal passes through the interneuron and then junctions or synapses with a motor neuron, and the impulse is carried straight along the motor neuron to a muscle or gland, which affects the response. So these sorts of reflexes are often involved in protective functions where we require a very, very rapid response. The example I've given here is if you put your foot on something sharp, like a piece of glass, your body wants to withdraw the foot quickly before much damage is done to it. So a spinal reflex response could be involved there. The reflex responses of the spinal reflex responses, they pass in and out of the spinal cord via nerves called spinal nerves, which pass in and out of the spinal cord at every vertebra. So every bony vertebra down the length of the spine has spinal nerves going into and out of it. The back of our body is called the dorsal surface. If you think of the dorsal fins of a fish, that's the back of the fish. Well, our dorsal surface is our back, and the passage of a spinal nerve into the dorsal surface of the spinal cord is called the dorsal root. Sensory neurons pass in through this dorsal root. They pass across the center of the spinal cord via the interneurons and relay neurons, and then they pass out to muscles and glands. They pass out of a ventral route, passing out the sort of inside part of the spine, facing the ventral surface of our body, which is at the front of our body, the ventral surface. So the motor neurons pass out through the ventral route. So you need to be able to draw and label a diagram of a spinal reflex arc, we call it. You need to know that the sensory neurons pass in through the dorsal route, that the interneuron carries the impulse, and then the motor neuron passes out through the ventral route to muscles and glands where a response is carried out. Okay. As well as looking at our own nervous system, and basically what we'd be looking at there is just a human nervous system, which would be found in other vertebrates, would be quite similar in other vertebrates. Simpler animals, such as here the hydra, which is an example of a simple animal called a coelenterate, that we find in fresh water, and it lives by catching tiny animals which might just accidentally swim into its tentacles. It itself isn't very large, it's just a few millimeters high, but tiny animals that might swim into those tentacles, it has stinging cells that can catch those animals and draw the animal down into its mouth. It only needs and only has a very simple nervous system to achieve this job, which is called a nerve net. So nerve cells are spread uniformly around the body, connected by simple connections similar to the dendrites that we've looked at. There's no centralized area of the nervous system. There's no head. There's no what we call cephalization, which is a sort of concentration of nerve cells in one place. It's just spread out evenly. And this means that the hydra doesn't really have a great deal of ability to create a directional response. So if something were to go into one of its tentacles, it just has an automatic response of pulling all of its tentacles back into its mouth and pushing whatever might be on the tentacle into the mouth. So it's a sort of a response which is not directional, but it's the same every time. And this serves its purpose fine. It doesn't need any greater specialization than that. Okay, so there's a quick summary of the structure of nervous systems, and you'll need to follow this video by looking at how a nerve impulse actually passes along a nerve cell in the next video on action potentials. Thank you.